Hello, friends. Good morning. Today we're back with another chapter of Red Dog by Bill Wallace. Today I'll be reading chapter 7, and as always, I am reading with permission of Simon and Schuster. So the big thing that happened yesterday, Adam, connected with his little sister Laurie a little bit, and they decided to name the red dog Ruff. So we'll pick up where we left off. They're on their way back to the cabin. Adam stopped as he rounded a shoulder of rock where Jenny Creek turned into their valley. A smile lit up his face when he looked down to where the log bridge was. 3 men were making their way across it. A fourth one, a big man with stooped shoulders and a beard, was headed toward the house. Adam could hardly believe his eyes. It had been almost a year since he had seen any other people besides Sam and Mother and Laurie. Company wasn't a commonplace thing in the backwoods of Wyoming territory. The land was rough and not made for easy travel. Most of the travelers on their way to the California gold fields took the pass through the Rockies down by Santa Fe or the one near Denver. The people around here were mainly trappers like Sam. Sometimes, according to Sam, you could go 2 years without seeing another soul. Adam felt sure this was the luckiest day of his life. First off, Laurie had come up with a name for the pup, and now they had company to talk with. They could find out what was going on in the world. With Laurie still on his shoulders, he raced off toward the cabin. Ruff ran ahead of them a few paces. When the pup saw the men, he drew up short. The hair raised on a ridge down his back, and he bared his teeth. "Quit that, Ruff," Adam scolded. "Haven't you ever seen people before?" The pup kept the hair on his back ruffled up and stayed crouched. Quiet, like he was stalking some kind of varmint, he crept toward the men. They made their way silently. About 100 yards away, the big man with the beard and stooped shoulders motioned the others to stop. Adam kept moving. But noticing how Ruff was taking to these men, he slowed to a walk and watched them. The big man made some motions with his hands. Adam was too far away to hear what he was saying. But after a minute, 2 of the men spread out into a wide circle away from Adam. The big man with the beard and a little fellow with a funny-looking round-topped hat moved on toward the cabin. Adam frowned, watching them. Something about the way they were acting didn't seem quite right. Why would they be splitting up? He asked himself. Why are those 2 going off around the side of the cabin? But before he had time to wonder about it much more, Mother put a stop to it. One of the wood shutters that covered the cabin windows burst open. From where he was, Adam could see the barrel of the big flintlock poking out. "Hold your ground!" His mother's voice came from inside. "What business brings you to my house?" Adam stopped where he was. The men were facing away from him, and a line of trees stood between him and the cabin. They hadn't seen him, and he had a funny feeling it might be better if they didn't. The 2 men who had started off around the cabin stopped too. The big man with the beard waved a hand, motioning them to come back. "Why are we stopping?" Laurie punched him. Adam rolled her off his shoulders and held her tight against him. "Hush, Laurie," he whispered. "Let's see what's going on before we go walking up." He held his hand ready to put over her mouth, just in case she decided to set up a fuss like she usually did. But Laurie must have sensed the worry in his voice. She crouched down against him and stayed real quiet. "Hello," the man called back to Mother. He waved and took a step forward. "That's close enough," Mother called back. "State your business." The red pup let out a soft growl. Adam snapped his fingers and whispered his name. He'd never seen Ruff like this. Even when he was trailing some varmint like that mountain lion, he never seemed so ready to fight as he was now. The big man held his rifle out to the side so Mother could see it. Then he set the butt on the ground and held it at arm's length. "Your man about?" Even talking friendly like now, the big man's voice sounded more like a growl. "You have business with my husband?" Mother asked. "Could be," the man called back. "Is he about?" Adam could see the end of Mother's flintlock quiver. Depends on what business you have with him, Mother lied. Adam felt a frown wrinkle his face. Sam had left early that morning to bait some of his traps up near the beaver dam at Lake Louise. Mother knew good and well he wouldn't be back until near dark. The man brushed a hand through his hair. His head was covered with long, dangling locks of greasy black hair, like he hadn't had a bath in months. He took another step toward the house. Perhaps it would be easier to talk if you allowed me to approach the cabin, he called. It strains my voice to yell. The rifle tensed at the window. Sir, you are close enough to state your business, and you are also close enough to compensate for my lack of skill with this rifle. Adam crouched even lower in the grass. He'd never before heard his mother threaten to shoot somebody, but the tone of her voice told him that's exactly what she was doing. Now state your business, sir, or leave. Well, ma'am, we mean you no harm, but I can understand your concern. A woman alone cannot be too cautious with strangers. I will abide by your wish and stay here to state my business. You've made a wise decision, Mother called back. When she ended her sentence, Adam thought he heard the hammer on the flintlock rifle click back, ready to fire. The big man straightened his stooped shoulders. We come to prospect for gold, me and my friends. We're camped a few miles from here on the Wind River. We've panned and found traces of yeller in the stream that flows into the Wind River from your property. We've also been troubled by Indians. We barely escaped our camp before we were overrun by the savages. The Indians here are peaceful, Mother said flatly, unless they see reason to be otherwise. Perhaps you've given them a reason. No, ma'am. We've done no such thing. As you know, any savage is unpredictable. He paused and said something to one of the men over his shoulder. The man nodded and started easing ever so slowly away from the others. We did nothing to disturb the Indians, the big man went on. But I ain't going to trouble you longer with our problems. What I come for... I have asked you once that you hold your ground. I shall not ask again. Mother's voice had the edge of a knife on it. Adam was glad she had noticed the man who was sneaking away from the others. If she hadn't, he was afraid he would have to jump up and warn her, and that would let them know he and Laurie were around. The man walked quickly back to the others and stood very still. Adam looked back to the cabin. The muzzle of the rifle bobbed up and down in the window. I must ask you to state your business quickly, Mother said. My arms have become very tired holding the rifle like this. I'm afraid that if you delay much longer, this gun might accidentally go off and hurt someone. The big man's face grew stern. He understood that Mother was tired of fooling with him. Finally, he nodded his shaggy head. We come to ask permission to pan for gold in your stream. We'd like to move our camp closer to your cabin. Since you done built a cabin and cleared land, it appears you must have good relations with the Indians in these parts. Perhaps if we stayed closer to you, we wouldn't have to worry about getting jumped like the other evening. Mother was quiet for a time. Then she made the end of the rifle bob up and down. The decision is one for my husband to make, she said. I will tell him what you wish and ask him to come to your camp to inform you of his decision. The big man cleared his throat. And when might we expect him? You can expect him when he arrives at your camp, Mother said curtly. Now, good day, gentlemen. They looked at one another. Then the big man said something to the others. He turned back to Mother and tipped his hat. Good day, ma'am. As they came across the meadow, Laurie started toward the house. Adam grabbed her and jerked her back. He wanted to stay here and watch, to make certain they were gone before he and Laurie showed themselves. The four men walked over the log bridge. From where Adam was hiding with Laurie, he could see them as they made their way down Jenny Creek. Long after they were out of sight, Adam stayed crouched in the grass with his hand near Laurie's mouth. After a time, Ruff started walking around. The hair on his back went down, smooth as usual, and in a little while he started bouncing and leaping in the air to snap at bugs. Adam knew enough about dogs to depend on their senses instead of his own. Even if he couldn't see the men or hear them, Ruff could. When the pup relaxed and started playing, he knew the men were gone. Then and only then he jumped to his feet. Dragging Laurie by one arm, he lit out for the house as fast as he could run. "Mother, it's me!" he called. The door opened, and once he was inside, Mother closed it and went back to the window where she'd been watching. "Did they see you?" Mother's words were almost as quick as her nervous actions. Adam shook his head. "I don't think so. Laurie and I hid when we saw you pointing the rifle out the window. Who were they?" Mother leaned to the side so she could get a better view. "I don't know," she said, "but I sure didn't like the looks of them. Nor did I like the way they acted. Those two trying to sneak around to the back of the house." "You want me to run and fetch Sam? I could make it to the beaver dam and back in a couple of hours." Mother shook her head. "No, he should be home soon. I want you and Laurie here." "You mean we just sit around and wait?" "That's right, Adam. We wait." And wait was exactly what they did. For the next 2 hours, Mother didn't budge from her place at the window. Adam tried to keep Laurie busy so she wouldn't be a pest. Every now and then he'd go over and watch with Mother a while. Ruff stayed near the house. Still happy and playing around, he was a sure sign the men had really left, and probably weren't coming back. It was hard sitting around with nothing to do, and when dark started settling in on them, the waiting seemed almost unbearable. "You reckon Sam's all right?" Adam asked as he stood beside Mother. His eyes squinted, straining against the long shadows cast by the mountains when the sun sank behind them. Mother frowned and shook her head. "He's all right," she assured him. Only her voice seemed to shake a little when she answered. "He should have been home by now, though." "Mama, I'm hungry." Laurie was tugging at her mother's skirt. Mother looked down at her, then at Adam, and rubbed her eyes. "My eyes are getting tired," she said. "You think you could stand guard while I fix supper for you?" Adam nodded. "Sure." Mother got up and handed him the big flintlock. It was so heavy he almost dropped it. He braced the big gun on the window ledge and sat down in the chair so he could watch. With the coming darkness and long shadows of evening, the woods and mountains always took on a quiet, peaceful appearance. All day long the wind was soft. In the evening it seemed to stop altogether. Not a breath, not a whisper of leaves on the aspen trees, nor the brushing of pine needles against each other like tiny swords clattering in an unseen battle. It was a time when the animals fell still. The creatures of the day scurried to their burrows to rest during the evening hours and wait for the morning light. The predators, those with wide yellow eyes that lurked in the night, waited in the mouths of their dark gaping dens until the moon was on the rise. Then they stole out, moving as quietly as the darkness itself to stalk their unsuspecting prey. Across the valley, a deer wandered from the cover of the tall pines and made her way across the meadow to the stream. Her long ears twitched this way and that, picking up sounds so faint that man could never hear them. Adam smiled as he watched her. She made her way, stopping to nibble at the long, lush grass of the meadow. Then she took no more than 3 or 4 steps before stopping and lifting her nose to smell any scent of danger that might be on the breeze. Adam lowered his cheek against the stock of the flintlock gun. He closed an eye and sighted her down the long barrel, just as she stopped to get her drink. It would be an easy shot, he thought, smiling. Suddenly she perked up her ears. She wheeled around, and all Adam saw was a flash of her white tail, for only a second before she was gone. Adam stiffened in his chair. Something had spooked her. He strained his eyes against the dark. If there was anything there, he couldn't see it. Then he scolded himself with a frown. "You weren't really doing your job. Mother leaves you to watch, and you sit and look at that deer, daydreaming about how pretty things are this time of evening. This isn't the time for that. Maybe tomorrow you can watch the colors of the sunset, or dream about shooting game for the table. But tonight, until Sam comes home, Mother and Laurie need you to protect them." He forced all the thoughts and daydreams from his mind and made himself concentrate on only one thing, watching for danger, until he felt Mother tap him on the shoulder. "Go eat your supper." She pointed to the table. "I'll watch." Adam hesitated. "I don't mind. My eyes are pretty good. You go ahead and eat, then I'll come." Mother smiled and motioned to him. "I ate while I was fixing the venison. You go on." He got up and handed her the gun. "A deer came to water a while back. Something over toward the ridge spooked her. Might keep an eye in that direction." Mother nodded. "I'll watch. You go on and eat," she said with a jerk of her head. "After you've finished, I'll have you watch again while I do the dishes." Adam hadn't thought about being hungry until he sat down at the table. Mother had warmed up some cornbread and a big pot of baked beans. That and the venison steak on his plate set his mouth to watering. He picked up his knife and started eating before he really knew it. His stomach was so empty it felt like it was sucked clean to his backbone, but it took no time at all before it was bulging out full of good food. There was a pan of molasses in the middle of the table. Adam spread some fresh churned butter on a giant slab of cornbread, then poured the molasses over it. "I couldn't ask for a better dessert," he thought, licking his lips. He hadn't even gotten to bite into it when Laurie accidentally dumped her plate. He shook his head, remembering how she always used to dump her milk over or spill something, only he thought she'd outgrown that. Before he could get to his feet to clean up after her, Laurie went to sniffing and whimpering. Mother came over to help clean up. "It's okay," Adam said. "I can do it." He knelt down, retrieved her plate, and tried to scoop up some of the food she'd spilled. Mother got a cloth from the washpan and started mopping the table and Laurie's clothes. "I'm sorry," Laurie sniffed. "I didn't mean to." Mother patted her knee. "It's all right. Accidents happen." Suddenly, there was a sound behind them. Adam spun around. The door of the cabin flew open. An Indian stood there. His red-brown skin shone in the light from the lantern. The long braids of his black hair framed the sharp, angry lines of his face. Mother jumped, then screamed. Laurie screamed too and started bawling. Adam's breath froze in his throat. The Indian glared at them with dark, frightening eyes that didn't blink. Like a flash of exploding gunpowder, Adam was on his feet. He leaped across the floor, knowing the big gun was their only hope. With the quickness of a cat, the red man was in front of him. He stood there, his stern eyes cutting right into Adam. There was no way around him. There was nothing Adam could do. That's the end of that chapter. I do want to add a quick note, though. Some of the cultural depictions of Indians in this book might seem a little outdated at first. It's important to remember when you're reading historical fiction that often historical fiction is written in a way that represents the way people thought and acted during that historical time period. So when you hear terms like red man used to describe Native Americans, you should understand that that's not really a term that we would use politely now, but it is reflective of the way that settlers in Wyoming might have thought about Native Americans, and it's not so offensive that we can't read it in a book. So I just want you to be thinking about that as you listen to further chapters, which I'll be posting in the days ahead. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.